Welcome to our webinar where we're going to discuss winter and your shelters. We are going to have 3 segments, and the first segment will be on how to prepare your structure for winter. Segment 2 will be caring for your structure after a snowfall, and segment 3 will be getting ready for spring. Now, in the first segment, quickly to just give you an overview, we're going to cover doing a visual check on the importance, drainage around your building, installing temporary snow support, inflating, roll-up sides, and making a snow removal tool. Now, one thing that is important is that these are not going to be discussed in order of importance, because we acknowledge that there will be a priority for each grower that is different. The first thing that I would like to highlight is the fact that it is really important that you know your building. Certain buildings are designed for more snow shedding. Some buildings are designed as being lower, that they will just catch less wind. If wind is a major concern where you are, you need to pay attention as to how your building is reacting to the wind. It is important to keep notes of what is happening. This is especially true if you are new to structures and you are new to growing. Next slide. Now, this is an example of a lower building. It's going to catch less wind, but the snow will pile up a little bit more quickly, so that will have to be paid attention to. Next slide. The first point that I'm going to cover here is the importance of doing a visual check before winter sets in. In this picture here, we have a lot of stuff sitting around, and the building is fairly open. This is a prime candidate for flying debris. What you need to do before winter is just do a walk around to make sure that there is nothing that can become a projectile in a storm. Now, there are more things that you need to do in a visual check, but it is important to do these one at a time. So in this case, we are focused on potential projectiles. So walk around your property with a specific focus of looking for projectiles. The other part of your visual check will be checking for damage to your cover. Make sure that any patches that have been put from previous damage are those patches are up to date and current, and also check to make sure that there are no new holes that will need patching. The reason that I'm saying you need to focus on just one thing at a time is when you're walking around doing a general look around and you see something that is potentially a projectile, and if you're moving as you're doing this, it's very easy to miss something. So that's why it is important to focus on one thing at a time. The other thing that warrants just a quick check is to make sure that there are no loose nuts and bolts anywhere. Make sure that the hinges and the latches and door hardware is all current, because these are all things that over the course of a winter, the wind will be rattling on things and just causing things to slowly get worse and worse. and eventually become a problem. Next slide. One of the things that it's probably too late, with this being the 2nd of December, too late to be checking for this winter, is drainage. The bigger that the building is, the more potential moisture you have going each way from the building. It is important to know, to be aware of, that moist ground has less holding power than dry ground. The other thing is, by getting more moisture beside the buildings and there is not proper drainage around your building, what will potentially happen is that you get moisture migrating under the base of your building into the building, and it becomes additional moisture that has to be contended with during the growing season, or if you've got you're using this for animal housing, it's also excessive moisture that is potentially a problem. So if this is something that you haven't already taken steps to cope with, that is something that you need to be aware of, and make sure that in the springtime that you will chance to increase the slope of the land to get moisture moving away, or if it's really a problem, to put in tile drainage or something similar to that. The next slide. A thing that is important to be aware of, and part of your preparation, is to have some available lumber handy that is at least in a length equal to the tallness of your building. You are not capable of foreseeing the future as to what you might need, so these need to be handy so that you can react quickly if there is a situation that needs some temporary support. One of the things that I point out to people that is important, and this will pertain to getting prepared, is that, as you can see on the slide, is that there is a notch in the wood. Now, this notch will be a little bigger than the width of your ridge. By having this notch there, and if you're propping up the structure, this ensures that this cannot slide from side to side. Now, when some people know that they're going to be away from their building for an extended period of time without the possibility of snow monitoring, these 2x4s can be put in place on a sort of semi-permanent basis. My suggestion is always to suspend these 2x4s. You're going to cut them so that they're about a centimeter short of touching the ground, and then loop something over the ridge and fasten it to the 2x4s. This way, if you are working inside the building and those 2x4s are hanging there, you can bump them out of the way, and they will just go back to where they're supposed to be. No matter how stormy the weather gets and how much the structure bounces around, these 2x4s will always be exactly where you need them when you need them. And then once the winter possibility of storms is past, you can move these to the side. But it is important not to jam them into place, because as the wind picks up and the structure starts moving a little bit, these can work themselves free. I have seen pictures of a structure that had an excess of snow that caused damage, and the 2x4s were simply sticking out through the cover, and that is a very discouraging thing to deal with because you've taken the time to prepare and it didn't work. Next slide. Many of the buildings that we supply are with a double cover and roll-up sides. Now, this can either be clear, as in a greenhouse, or with white when it's being used for livestock. Now, the air is, during the main part of the season, the air will be between the upper levels. And as you're rolling the bottom up and down, there obviously is not a potential for having air in between that. Now, when you are at the stage of shutting down for the wintertime, then what you will do is roll that down, put the wire inserts at both ends, significantly tighten up the rope so that it is firmly holding the cover against the structure. And the last thing that you will need to do is, now this applies if you have the wood strapping as what you see in this picture, or if you have wire lock on the steel tubing, you will need to remove a little bit of what is pinching off the plastic, just so that the air can escape from the top to the bottom. We usually suggest that as a way of, rather than installing a jumper from above the divider to below it, because if you do that, then in the springtime, when it is time to reverse the process, you will now have a hole to contend with. So the rule of thumb is roughly 6 inches of piece that you need to remove per 50 feet, or in metric, that would be like about 15 centimeters for 50 meters. A little bit more at both ends if you get a longer building than that. And this will allow the air to escape from the top into the bottom. But it is important to really pull that rope tight so that it holds the pipe and the plastic in place. Otherwise, you could potentially be inflating that bottom piece with the pipe rising up and leaving a gap in the bottom. Normally, it is not necessary to secure that pipe down to the bottom, but there are some half pipe straps which you can purchase from the building supply store that would be able to lock that down if you find that that's being a problem. And the fifth slide, please. One of the things that you should do in preparation for the winter is to make a snow removal tool. As I have a miniature version of this in that is being shown here. Now, the cross piece will always be about 2/3 of the spacing between your hoops. So if you've got 4-foot spacing, that the maximum length that cross piece should be is 3 feet, a little bit smaller if your spacing is narrower than that. The length of the pole will correspond to the height of your building, and it needs to be long enough so that you can comfortably reach the cover everywhere on the building. And it is important that that cross piece is padded. You can use some carpeting to just wrap that, just to make sure there's no edges. It's also probably a good idea before you're putting that padding on, and the padding can actually hang over the ends a little bit. So for example, if you have a 3-foot long board, to make your padding, say 3 feet and 3 inches or 4 inches, just so that it hangs over the little bit, and just run the corners of that grinder or that board through a grinder, just so that there's no actual corners. And so that brings me to the end of the pointers that I want to share in preparing for the winter. As I said at the start, this is not in the order of importance, but if you have a building that is prone to collecting snow, then obviously getting a snow removal tool is of utmost importance. We're going to cover in the next video caring for your building after a snowfall, so we're going to get into that in more detail. But it is also, we'd like to just remind people the value of joining our Community Connection newsletter. By signing up for that, we have some things as a thank you to help you in your planning process, and helping you to prepare for a long life of your building. Also, and we look forward to seeing you in the next segment.